Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a pretty intense historical debate that's been blowing up online lately.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. We'll kick things off with the claims that really started this whole firestorm. Then, we'll walk through how historian Victor Davis Hanson pushes back on each one, point by point. And finally, we'll zoom out and look at the much bigger picture he's painting. So, how did this all get started? Well, it kicked off with an interview where some, let's just say, really provocative claims were made about World War II. And that prompted a pretty detailed response from the historian Victor Davis Hanson. And here it is. This was the big one, the claim that really set everything off. The idea that, quote, one can make the argument we should have sided with Hitler. I mean, that's a radical rethinking of America's entire role in the war, right? All right, so let's tackle that first major claim head on. Hanson goes right after this assertion, this idea that an alliance with Hitler was ever really a workable or even a desirable option for the United States.
So, you have the claim on one side. The US should have sided with Hitler to take on Stalin, but Hanson's rebuttal is basically, whoa, hold on. He says that to even suggest that, you have to completely ignore what the Nazi regime was at its very core. Their ideology, he argues, made any kind of real alliance totally impossible from the get-go.
And he doesn't just say this, he brings the receipts. He points to things that were known long before any potential US involvement. You've got Mein Kampf, where Hitler literally laid out his vision for conquering Eastern Europe for living space. Then there's the Hunger Plan, a pre-invasion strategy, mind you, to deliberately starve millions in Ukraine to feed Germany. And the Einsatzgruppen. These weren't just soldiers, they were mobile death squads, active in Poland from day one of the war in 1939. By the time Germany even invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, thousands of Jews and Poles had already been murdered. So, for Hanson, the point is this genocidal project wasn't some late-game development. It was baked into Nazism from the start. That makes the whole idea of partnering with them to prevent something like that, well, it just doesn't add up.
Okay, on to the next point. This one brings in a huge name, the famous, hard-charging American general George S. Patton. The claim revolves around what he supposedly believed about fighting with the Germans. And right away, Hanson draws a really bright line here. The claim is that Patton wanted to ally with Hitler during the war. But Hanson's rebuttal is, no, that's not what happened. He says Patton's actual comments were about fighting the Soviets after the war was already over, using former German soldiers. He argues the words have been ripped completely out of their post-war context. It's all about the timing and what Patton actually intended.
So let's paint the picture of that context, right? The war in Europe is over. Patton is essentially the military governor of Bavaria, tasked with rebuilding. And he's watching the Soviet Union gobble up Eastern Europe, and he starts seeing them as the next big threat. It's in that moment that he floats this idea. Hey, why don't we rearm some of these defeated German troops and go right after the Soviets now? Now, Hanson himself calls this idea bad and naive. He's not defending it, but he's stressing that it's a world away from wanting to partner up with Hitler during the actual war against the Allies.
All right. That brings us to the third big claim. This one's about Pearl Harbor, and the suggestion that there's some kind of big untold story, hinting at a conspiracy by the Roosevelt administration to get America into the war.
And this timeline here really lays out the sequence of events that Hanson talks about. And look, he acknowledges the facts that get the conspiracy theories going. In May 1940, yes, FDR orders the Pacific Fleet moved from San Diego out to Pearl Harbor. The admiral in charge, Richardson, objects. He reportedly calls it a noose, and he gets relieved of command for it. Admiral Kimmel takes over, and then, of course, in December 41, the attack happens. So yeah, these events are totally real and well documented.
But here's where Hanson pushes back. He basically says, look, this isn't some secret story that's been covered up. This has been a known historical debate among scholars for decades. Was Roosevelt looking for a way into the war? Hanson says, yeah, probably. But the idea that he deliberately conspired to have his own fleet wiped out, Hanson argues the evidence just isn't there. He frames it not as a conspiracy, but as a legitimate debate about Roosevelt's judgment and, frankly, a massive underestimation of what Japan was capable of. Okay, so after tackling those specific historical claims, Hanson zooms way out in the final part of his analysis. He starts connecting this one interview to a pattern he sees in other recent media segments that he finds, well, pretty troubling. And he really just puts the question out there. Are these just random, separate incidents? Or is there some kind of common theme, a larger narrative that's connecting all these different media appearances?
And he points to a few specific examples that, on the surface, seem totally unrelated. You've got an interview from inside a Russian supermarket praising how great it is. Then a segment with a cleric in Bethlehem who's blaming Israel for Christians leaving the city.
He also brings up previous discussions with figures like Darryl Cooper that question Nazi intentions. And then, of course, the interview we've been talking about. Hanson's point is that these aren't just random bits of commentary. And this is where he lands. This is his bottom line conclusion on the whole matter.